I want you to just picture a perfect early spring evening. Like you are standing on a plateau and the setting sun has just painted the whole landscape this magnificent, deep crimson red.
Oh, wow, that sounds gorgeous.
Right, it is. And all around you, there is this soft, rolling yellow dust being kicked up by shepherds, bringing their flocks back home for the night.
Hmm.
You can see wisps of cooking smoke drifting up from the rooftops of the nearby villages. You can hear all those typical sounds of the evening settling in, people chatting, dogs barking, sheep bleating. It's the absolute picture of rural tranquility.
It sounds so idyllic, almost timeless, really, like a painting depicting pastoral life before the modern world just rushed in.
Exactly. But then, without a single warning sign, the earth beneath your feet just starts to tremble.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the tranquility shatters. Suddenly, from the summit of Mount Sail, which has been towering quietly over this scene for millennia, by the way, a dense yellow column of smoke erupts into the sky. And it doesn't look like a normal fire. It looks like a giant bomb exploding.
So the livestock must just instantly panic,
Yeah.
right? I mean, scattering in every direction.
Total chaos. The people in the villages are caught completely off guard. They have absolutely no idea what is happening.
I mean, how could they?
Right. And before they can even process the threat, before they can even turn to run, Mount Sail abruptly, visibly shrinks.
It shrinks.
It literally collapses in on itself. The ground starts violently shifting, knocking people right off their feet. Walls crumble, houses fall, whole villages are flattened into rubble in the blink of an eye.
That is terrifying.
And then comes the mud. A rolling wave of mud surges out from halfway up the mountainside, roaring as it rushes down into the valley. People are screaming, running for their lives, but they just cannot outrun it.
Because mudslides move so fast.
Exactly. This one is moving at nearly 20 meters per second. In just a few short minutes, over 400 livestock and 237 men, women, and children from 3 different villages are buried alive.
God, it is a staggering, just unimaginable level of devastation. And then I assume just as quickly as it started, the dust settles. The wilderness returns to this dreadful, terrifying silence.
Yeah, it sounds like something straight out of a Hollywood disaster movie.
Yeah.
But it is a factual historical account of the Mount Sail landslide in Gansu Province, China, and it is the focal point of today's deep dive.
It's a heavy one today.
It really is. We are looking at an excerpt titled, "The Small Changes Gradually Occur, While the Big Changes Happen in an Instant." It's written by Su Feng and edited by Ji Jing. Our mission today is to look at this specific, horrific event and use it to understand a much broader, frankly terrifying truth about the anatomy of catastrophe.
Right, we're exploring how disasters, whether they are geological, historical, or even just personal, actually build up over time.
Okay, let's unpack this, because after an event of this magnitude, the immediate human reaction is to try and make sense of it. I mean, people desperately need to find a cause.
What's fascinating here is the local consensus immediately following the landslide. The text notes that the author actually lived not far from Mount Sail at the time, so news of the disaster reached their hometown very quickly.
Right.
And the general agreement among the people in the area was that this was a tianzai, a natural disaster, an act of God.
Like it just happened.
Yeah, the mountain simply fell, and it was a terrible, unpredictable tragedy of nature.
Which is such a common reflex, right? Think about a towering, seemingly healthy oak tree in your neighborhood that suddenly just topples over in a relatively light breeze.
Oh, I've seen that happen.
Right. Everyone comes out of their houses, looks at the fallen tree and says, wow, that wind must have been incredibly strong. You automatically assume it was the weather.
Because that's the immediate visible force.
Exactly. But if you actually look closely at the stump, you see the core of the tree is completely hollowed out by rot. The real story isn't the wind. The real story is the rot that has been spreading silently through the roots for years. So looking at Mount Sail, I really struggle to accept the Qianzai explanation. I mean, a mountain doesn't just spontaneously decide to shrink.
No, it doesn't. But it is a protective psychological reflex. If a catastrophe of this scale is just a natural disaster, well, there is nothing anyone could have done. It absolves everyone.
That makes sense. It's easier to swallow.
Right. But if we pull the thread on your rot in the oak tree idea, we arrive at the much more difficult question posed by Mr. Zhang Yi's urgent report on China's ecological collapse, which the text brings into the spotlight. The question is, was this really a tianzai? Or was it renhuo, man-made calamity?
Right. And to explore that renhuo hypothesis, we really have to zoom in. The narrative moves from the macro scale of a collapsing mountain to a very micro, intensely personal tragedy involving relocation. The area around the author's hometown used to be quite picturesque, but then came the construction of the Lujiaxia Reservoir.
And this project required sweeping relocation. The state apparatus moved the local community to a totally new area.
A tough area, too.
Very harsh. It was a landscape full of gullies and ravines where these people had to completely rebuild their lives and their homes from scratch.
And in this new, really difficult environment, they had to farm. There is a story in the text about a distant uncle out irrigating a field one day, bringing his young son along to play nearby. They had been out there irrigating for less than 2 hours, just 2 hours, and suddenly the flat ground right where the little boy was standing simply gave way. It just opened up and swallowed the child.
Oh, God. The uncle didn't even realize what was happening until it was too late. He helplessly watched as his young son was swallowed alive by the earth.
The text says the uncle and the boy's aunt cried for 3 days and 3 nights. It is an unfathomably heavy loss. But it brings us to a very pointed, mechanical question.
Right, the physics of it.
Yeah, because, wait, ground doesn't just open up like a trap door after 2 hours of surface watering. I can understand a puddle forming, maybe some mud, but a sinkhole deep enough to swallow a child, how does that actually happen?
Well, it comes down to the underlying chemistry and geology of the soil in that specific region. When you introduce a concentrated, unnatural flow of water to dry, porous ground, the water acts as a solvent.
So it's literally dissolving the earth.
Exactly. It doesn't just sit on top. It percolates down and begins dissolving subterranean minerals. Over time, this continuous flow of water literally washes away the structural support beneath the surface.
Creating like an underground cave.
Yes, an invisible, hollow void.
Yeah.
A subterranean cavern. The top crust of the soil might look perfectly flat and solid to a farmer standing on it, but underneath there's nothing holding it up. When the weight of the crust, or the weight of a person standing on it, finally exceeds the structural integrity of that increasingly thin top layer, it snaps. The collapse is instantaneous.
Okay, I can wrap my head around a localized sinkhole in a field caused by an irrigation ditch. But we are talking about Mount Sale, a massive geological formation. How does surface-level farming scale up to bring down millions of tons of rock and earth?
It's the same principle, just on a much grander scale.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the text outlines the broader historical context of what was happening in this region agriculturally. And just for you listening, we are strictly looking at the historical facts presented in the text here. We aren't taking any political stance, just reporting what the source says to understand the event.
Right. Purely historical context.
Historically, the Mount Sale region had relied entirely on natural rainfall for its farming.
But that ecosystem fundamentally changed with sweeping agricultural reforms. The text specifically highlights the great achievement of Das Hai in a famous film called Red Flag Canal. These touchstones promoted a specific ideology, fighting heaven and earth. The goal was to transform barren mountains into fertile, productive fields through sheer human willpower and determination.
People were literally carving terraced fields into the sides of mountains. They built these vast irrigation channels halfway up the slopes, forcibly redirecting water from the plains up onto the high plateau. They were basically pumping water into an environment that had never held that kind of moisture before.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we see the mechanical reality of what happens when you try to override geology. Mount Sale was inherently fragile. It's composed of dry, loess soil.
Very porous stuff.
Very. When you introduce unprecedented amounts of water into that kind of geology, through reservoirs, through terraced irrigation, through rerouted plains water, you radically alter the physics of the mountain. Terracing alters natural runoff, forcing water deep into geological fissures.
Right, because mountains aren't just solid, uniform blocks of stone. They are made of layers. You have heavy topsoil resting on bedrock, and the friction between those layers is what keeps the mountain upright.
And that is where hydrostatic pressure comes in.
Ah, yeah.
As all that redirected water seeps down through the terrace fields, it hits the impermeable bedrock and begins to pool. It builds up inside the rock layers. Now, water is incredibly heavy and it does not compress.
Right.
As it accumulates, it creates immense outward pressure, literally pushing those geological layers, what we call the slip planes, apart. Furthermore, the water acts as a lubricant. It takes the rough, high-friction contact between soil and rock and turns it into a frictionless slide.
Man, think about the tragic irony here. People thought they were mastering the mountain through sheer determination. They were celebrated as heroes conquering nature. But by forcing water into it, they were dissolving its foundation. They were turning solid earth into a lubricated slip and slide. The mountain didn't just decide to fall one day. It was methodically, invisibly weakened by every drop of redirected water until it reached a critical threshold.
It is the ultimate tragedy of hubris. I mean, you can carve all the terraces you want, but you cannot legislate away hydrostatic pressure. The physical laws of the Earth operate entirely independently of human ideology.
So what does this all mean? How do we take the mechanics of a collapsing mountain and apply it to a broader philosophy of life?
Well, the author bridges that gap with a grand philosophical theory stated right in the title of our source text. Small changes gradually occur, leading to big changes happening in an instant.
It's a powerful statement.
It is. The thesis is that what we perceive as sudden disasters are practically never sudden. They are merely the final, visible breaking point of a long, invisible process of accumulation.
And the text proves this isn't just a theory about geology. It lists a diverse array of other instantaneous disasters to establish this as a universal law. The devastating 1976 Tangshan earthquake, the 9/11 attacks, the atomic bomb in Hiroshima, the Chernobyl disaster, train derailments, plane crashes, car accidents. They even include medical emergencies like cerebral hemorrhages and heart attacks.
I know, it feels a bit jarring at first, right? To put a heart attack next to a train derailment or an earthquake. But the unifying characteristic is the illusion of suddenness.
The illusion, I like that.
Because the catastrophic event erupts exactly when people least expect it. But look at the underlying mechanisms. A train derailment doesn't happen because the steel tracks suddenly decided to snap one Tuesday.
Right.
It happens because of microscopic mechanical fatigue, thousands of heavy cars rolling over the same slight imperfection day after day, slowly widening a hairline fracture until the metal finally shears.
Or a heart attack. Someone collapses out of nowhere, and we call it a sudden cardiac event. But the plaque has been silently building up in their arteries for decades.
Decades.
The space for the blood to flow was gradually narrowing, millimeter by microscopic millimeter. The heart attack is just the one single second where the blood finally cannot get through.
Exactly. Or the Tangshan earthquake.
Yeah.
The tectonic plates had been grinding against each other, building up unfathomable friction and pressure deep underground for centuries. The actual earthquake was just the release of that accumulated tension.
So the instant part is just the symptom.
Exactly. In every single example, the gradual accumulation is completely hidden from view, while the instant manifestation is violently obvious.
It's like the invisible process of aging. You don't wake up one morning and discover you've aged a decade overnight. You look in the mirror every day and you look essentially the same.
Right, you don't see it.
But the microscopic cellular changes, the degradation of telomeres, the loss of collagen, that is gradually occurring every single second. Or think about watching a sunset, like the one we described at the very beginning of the deep dive.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
If you stare directly at the sun, you cannot perceive it moving. The movement is too slow for the human eye to track in real time. But you look away, you look back, and it's below the horizon.
Plant growth is another excellent example explored in the text. You can stare at a seedling for hours and you will not see it grow. But the biological synthesis is happening. The author actually expands on this concept, drawing on their other writings like Perplexities and Insights of Life and Life is a Journey, to show how deeply ingrained our blindness to gradual change really is.
Yeah, and the poetic imagery used in those pieces is really striking. They use historical and mythological metaphors to show how oblivious humanity can be.
Oh, definitely.
Take the story of Noah's Ark. Noah was mocked for building this colossal boat on dry land. People laughed at him because they couldn't see the flood coming. The sky was clear, the weather was fine.
The outside world was in a frenzy of joy and normal life, completely ignoring the warning signs. But the moment the doors of the ark closed, the period of gradual buildup was over. The instantaneous big change. The flood wiped out everything without a trace.
And then there's the Titanic, which is perhaps the most perfect metaphor for this entire concept. You have this towering, luxurious ship sailing across the Atlantic. The people on board are dancing, drinking, filled with joy. They feel completely secure.
They thought it was unsinkable.
Right. But beneath the surface of the dark water, the iceberg is waiting. But the disaster wasn't just hitting the iceberg. The real disaster was the massive lag time between the gradual failure and the instant breach.
That lag time is so crucial that Titanic received multiple Marconi telegraph warnings about ice fields for hours before the crash, which were largely ignored or brushed aside.
People were too busy having a good time.
Exactly. And even when the iceberg was finally spotted, the physical momentum of a ship that size makes a sudden turn impossible. The rudder was turned, but the ship continued to glide forward along its disastrous trajectory.
The crash was set in motion hours, if not days, before the metal of the hull actually buckled in the freezing water. The collision was just the final, instant manifestation of a sequence of ignored warnings and accumulated momentum.
The text even introduces a more mystical metaphor, mentioning a colorful celestial gate that was predicted to temporarily close around 2013, warning that once closed, it would be incredibly hard to find its trace again.
Which is pretty heavy stuff.
It is. But regardless of how one interprets that specific date or gate, the underlying philosophical message is urgent. This raises an important question. While humanity is busy celebrating its technological advancements, cheering the Apollo moon landing, for example, are we entirely missing the subtle, gradual shifts that are moving us toward our own destruction?
Wow.
Are we basically dancing on the deck of the Titanic, completely blind to the icebergs we are slowly steering toward?
The phrasing in the source material is just so blunt about this. It says, whether you believe it or not, big changes happen in an instant. You don't have to believe in the iceberg for it to tear through the hull of your ship. You don't have to believe that water creates hydrostatic pressure for a mudslide to bury your village.
No, you don't.
The physical laws of gradual accumulation followed by instant collapse operate whether we pay attention to them or not.
The sudden heart attack isn't the beginning of the disease. It is the end of a long, silent process. The collapse of Mount Sale wasn't the start of the disaster. It was the final, terrifying symptom of years of structural weakening caused by human intervention and water redirection.
We are just fundamentally wired to react to the instant of the big change.
Yes, but we are dangerously blind to the gradual progression of the small ones.
So let's look back at the incredible journey we've been on today. We started by standing on a peaceful plateau in Gansu province, watching an idyllic evening shattered by a terrifying, deadly mudslide that swallowed 3 villages in a matter of minutes.
Right. And from there, we examined the psychological reflex to label such horrors as unpredictable acts of God. But through the heartbreaking reality of a child lost to an irrigation sinkhole, we explored the mechanics of soil erosion.
We saw how human intervention, specifically the sweeping redirection of water for agricultural projects driven by a desire to conquer nature, can secretly undermine the bedrock of the earth we stand on.
We broke down the physics of hydrostatic pressure to understand how the hubris of forcing water into a fragile mountain led to an inevitable, catastrophic collapse.
And finally, we followed that logic out of the realm of geology and into a profound philosophy of life. The realization that the terrifying instant disaster, whether a mechanical failure, a medical emergency, or a societal collapse, is always, without exception, born from the slow, invisible accumulation of small changes.
It demands a complete paradigm shift in how we view the world around us. I mean, if we accept this premise, we can no longer afford to just wait and react to the big sudden events.
Yeah.
We have to train ourselves to look beneath the surface.
We have to look for the tiny, creeping shifts.
Exactly.
Which brings us to a brilliant, challenging final line in our source text. After laying out this entire philosophy, after explaining the mechanics of the mountain and the tragic momentum of the Titanic, the essay simply asks, do you have any further questions?
It's a great way to end it.
It really is, and I think the only appropriate response is to turn that question inward. So to you listening right now, I want to leave you with this thought to mull over. If big changes, whether it's a mountain collapsing, a sudden illness striking, or a drastic shift in a relationship or a career, if those things happen in a terrifying instant entirely because of small, unseen, gradual shifts, what small changes are silently accumulating in your own life or in your own environment right now, completely unnoticed, just waiting for their instant